to internet since the year 2012. And I would introduce myself as the lesser known person here. Obviously, the other two guest speakers are very well known. So I am Syed Mohammad Haroon. I'm a volunteer legal counsel at sflc.in. I am handling the vertical of internet shutdowns along with digital security trainings, along with litigations that SFLC takes on for various matters concerning digital rights. Today, we'll be talking about the Internet Shutdowns report and the necessity for this report. It is very common knowledge these days in the past 2 to 5 years that internet shutdowns have become a recurring tool for the governance impacting fundamental rights, economic activity, and democratic participation. This report builds on the Internet Shutdown Tracker research to examine shutdown trends, legal framework, and their wide-ranging consequences. We have covered in this report, building on the report that we published in the year 2022, we are covering shutdowns from January 2023 to December 2024. And by this report, we are assessing legal, economic, and societal implications. We are drawing from case studies, legal developments, and stakeholder insights. Since we have started tracking internet shutdowns in India, we have noted 847 shutdowns so far, with 3 shutdowns in the year 2025 already. As we are proceeding with this session, we have an ongoing internet shutdown in the state of Jharkhand for matter of examinations, which will be lasting for 3 days. Now comes the topic of why internet shutdowns and why are we even talking about this, and why are these shutdowns imposed. The first thing is the reasons which is given under the law and by the government is the maintenance of law and order. That is done to prevent violence and riots, for curbing cheating in exams, for national security concerns, which include combating terrorism and extremism, and preventing information leaks and breaches. There are other justifications such as controlling large gatherings, maintaining public order during specific events. For this, we have very esteemed guests with us who have been advocates against internet shutdowns for the past number of years. Maybe even I did not know what internet shutdown is. Their work spans to that age. So we have Ms. Anuradha Bhasin, who's the managing editor of the Kashmir Times, and we have Ms. Vrinda Grover, who's an advocate in the Supreme Court and has been actively working against internet shutdowns. I'll go into the deeper details of this work, of their work, at a later stage because it's vast and it takes a lot of time. I mean, I've been reading about their work, so yeah, it's a fan moment for me. Sorry for that being out there. So yeah. Moving on, we have the internet shutdowns in India. As I said, being a part of the coalition, Keep It On coalition, we have been recording the cases of internet shutdowns since the year 2012. And we have categorized internet shutdowns into 2 different parts. The first one being blanket bans. This is what we record. Blanket bans are complete cutoff of internet services, be it through mobile, be it through broadband services, or could be both. And the biggest, most recent case of this we have seen in the state of Manipur. Beyond that, there's a phenomenon called throttling, where the internet speed is controlled and throttled to be reduced, to be available at a reduced state. This is also something that we saw again in the state of Manipur, and previously we have seen this in Jammu and Kashmir, where after the courts intervened, the internet services were activated, but at a very, very slow pace, which caused a lot of trouble during the COVID-19 pandemic, when the citizens of Kashmir could not even download a 2 megabytes PDF document on UN health regulations. Now comes the topic of why are we doing this work, what SFLC does, and how do we track internet shutdowns. So this internet shutdowns tracker, which is available on internetshutdowns.in, is the first of its kind and the only internet shutdowns tracker in India. We draw attention to the troubling trend of disconnecting access to internet services, and we actively engage with the government for no internet shutdowns. Along with this, we also document the impact of shutdowns by engaging with the citizens to understand the impact caused by these internet disruptions. Moving on, coming to this report and what this report covers. The report is primarily divided into 4 chapters. The first chapter being legislative history and the background of the legislation targeting and dealing with internet shutdowns. This begins at section 144 of CRPC, which has now changed in the BNSS. Then came the 2017 rules, along with the amendments, case laws, and then more recently, after the promulgation of Telecommunications Act, we have the Telecom Suspension Rules of 2024. We have dealt with in detail what are the drawbacks, what are the issues, and what are the good things about these. Good things, I must say, again, about these rules. And since we have published a report in 2022, we are now looking at the year 2023 and 2024. Just to give you a brief highlight before we move on to the deeper discussions, we have 96 shutdowns, instances of shutdowns, that is 96 orders were notified for internet shutdowns in the year 2023 and 60 in 2024. We also calculate the most recurring states which impose internet shutdowns. We have in 2023, in a chronological order, Manipur, Haryana, Jammu and Kashmir, Bihar, and Rajasthan, which changed in 2024, with Haryana being the topmost, Manipur very second less, just by one less internet shutdown, Rajasthan, Punjab, and Odisha. Further, there are again types of internet shutdowns. That means how are they imposed and what are the networks that they're affecting. So there are 2 ways to look at this. There is preventive shutdowns and there is reactive shutdowns. Preventive shutdowns are something which are imposed without there being a due cause as a precautionary measure. Then what we have seen throughout our work since 2012 is that there's an increased usage of preventive shutdowns, even in the absence of an active unrest. The details on the law is something that I'd like Ms. Grover to speak on later on, but I'm just telling you this for the time being. There are other networks affected. So there is broadband versus mobile internet impact. So we, as per our knowledge, as per the reports published in India, 95% of the users use mobile internet as their primary mode of communication. And a majority of the internet shutdowns target mobile services, thereby disproportionately affecting low-income and marginalized communities. Moving on, there are impacts of shutdowns. So behind every shutdown, there are real people. In 2024, millions of voices were silenced due to internet restrictions. In fact, top 10 VPN data reports that 39.9 million people were impacted because of internet shutdowns just in the year 2024 alone. Now, what are these impacts? These impacts range from business, education, and activism. Apart from communication, these are other things which are impacted. So, as we all know, since the COVID-19 pandemic, thousands of students have access, and institutions as well have shifted to online platforms. And in case there is an internet shutdown, these students lose access to online classes, affecting their academic year. The most recent and prevalent phenomenon of that is in the state of Manipur, where the long internet shutdown deeply impacted a lot of students who could not attend their classes. Then there is business. The entrepreneurs and small businesses face immense setbacks as they struggle without digital tools for their daily operations. Moreover, the gig economy, such as Zomato, such as Uber, all of their economy is based on the access to internet and, more importantly, access to mobile internet. In the case of an internet shutdown, those economic activities are completely halted. The last and the most important one is the activism part, where the freedom of speech and spreading messages, right to protest, is curtailed because of internet shutdowns, where the people protesting are unable to spread their messages, which significantly affects their causes and causes undue delay and elongated protest. There are some cases where entire communities were cut off from critical news and emergency services, such as the state of Manipur, such as the state of Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir previously. These shutdowns aren't just technical issues, they are a matter of survival for me. Moving on, the biggest impact which is there, we believe that, okay, education is lost. the communication is cut. But there is this most significant loss, most significant toll that even the government faces along with an individual, which is the financial toll of an internet shutdown. We rely on the records of top 10 VPN data, which records and conducts statistical analysis of economic loss. And they have reported that in the year 2023, we had suffered $585.4 million of loss, while in 2024, the number though shrunk to $322.9 million, but the loss is still significant. It's a 57.8, let's say 58% decrease, but when we consider that on side of our global economy, that's a significant number and cannot be neglected. Moving on, there are some special cases of internet shutdowns, which we have recorded in the past 2 years. The first one is very famous, that's the Manipur unrest. So in the state of Manipur, the internet shutdowns began on May 3rd, 2023, with a staggering 200 plus days long shutdowns in the year 2023. That internet shutdown continued in a scattered manner even after the High Court judgment in the year 2024, which has no impact on curbing violence, fake news, and unrest. The elongated protest and unrest is a proof that internet shutdowns are not the best tool to curb unrest and to curb fake news. Then we have a very unknown case in the history of internet shutdowns tracking in India, which is the case of January protest. In September 4th, 2024, there was a violence in Asifabad district, Jainur village, in Telangana due to clash between people from two different communities. The violence, which was curbed in only a matter of few days, more specifically 4 days, but the internet blockade in the region lasted for more than 40 days, which is a complete disproportionate effect affecting education, economy, and emergency services for all citizens. Then there are cheating in exams, for which Ms. Grover is the counsel and has a lot of knowledge, and so is Ms. Bhasin. So cheating in exams is something that the government considers a public order situation, and for an examination which is being conducted at a specific location, at a specific test center, there is a complete blanket ban on internet for the whole district or the number of districts. We have frequent imposers of internet shutdowns, such as these, which are state of Arunachal Pradesh, Rajasthan, Bihar, and Gujarat, and today Jharkhand again. There are other examinations for which a number of states have imposed internet shutdowns. While the authority have justified these as with a preventive measure, they cause widespread disruptions affecting business, students, emergency services. And this is imposed while there are alternative mechanisms in place. Now, the last one is the farmers' protest, which sitting in Delhi, we almost all of us have faced this. During the farmers' protest in the year 2023 as well as 2024, we have seen that the government has imposed multiple internet shutdowns across the borders of Punjab, Haryana, and Delhi, citing security concerns. And these shutdowns have disrupted communications among protesters, restricted media coverage, and hindered access to essential services, raising concerns about digital rights and freedom of expression. Other than this, we have in the report covered a plethora of judgments from various high courts and Supreme Court in India that talk about the developments we have so far on the topic of internet shutdowns. These include ongoing and disposed of cases where the Supreme Court or the relevant high courts have given guidelines, and also the matters which are currently pending before the court. With this, I would bring in the experts and speak in detail about the real life experiences of this. So the first speaker, I'll introduce the both speakers and then we can move ahead. The first speaker is Ms. Anuradha Bhasin, who is the managing editor of the Kashmir Times. She's a journalist with over 3 decades of experience. She has expertise in covering and writing about Kashmir conflict, human rights, militarizations, and security affairs. Her work also focuses on wide-ranging other issues, including the intersection of militarizations, development and climate change, communities, and identity politics in the Kashmir region. She's also the author of the book Adus Mental State, The Untold Story of Kashmir after Article 370, published by HarperCollins India in 2022, and has contributed to several anthologies and monographs beside Indian and international publications. She's a Commonwealth Fellow 2016, John S. Knight Fellow 2023, and Senior JSK Journalism Fellow at Stanford 2024. Then we have Ms. Vrinda Grover, who's an advocate in the Supreme Court of India and a human and gender rights activist. She is the arguing counsel for SFLC.in and Arunachal Pradesh and others versus Arunachal Pradesh and others, which is a case challenging internet shutdowns imposed on the ground of exam-related concerns. Other than that, she has been the counsel for petitioner in the landmark judgment of Anuradha Bhasin versus Union of India. In this landmark case, the Honorable Supreme Court held that the constitutional protection extends to activities done through the internet in exercise of freedom of speech and expression, and the fundamental right to practice any profession. The court also held that the indefinite suspension of internet in Kashmir is unlawful. With that, I would first begin with Ms. Anuradha Bhasin for her opening statements and proceed thereafter. Ma'am, you're on mute.
Yeah. Sorry, could you repeat that?
With that, I want you to start with your opening statements and talk about the internet shutdowns and impact on journalism and press freedom. Perhaps we can begin from that.
Look, journalism, like all other professions, is severely impacted by internet shutdowns, because journalists need internet for collecting information sometimes, for authenticating it. We are living in a digital era when we have transition. I mean, we worked in the typewriter era when we didn't rely on these things. But today we do. And there are several tools that help us to authenticate information, to gather information, to get backgrounds, to verify facts, to disseminate information. We all have websites where much of journalism is now also operating only in the digital space rather than the print space. So these are changing times, and journalism is extremely dependent on internet. But for me, I think the wake-up call for this really came in 2019. Even before that, internet shutdowns had been happening. They were more localized. They were restricted to some regions. They were not there was not a complete ban on internet. Either the mobile internet was usually shut, so the broadbands were available. Most journalists did have that, but some journalists in the peripheral areas were always impacted because they relied on mobile internet services. So, that intensity of 2019 was so immense that all you could hear around was silence. I mean, I was sitting in Jammu, and Jammu was the only place where and some of its surrounding districts where the broadband services were working. And that's probably when I realized how this can this can create a chilling effect on journalism.
Yeah, certainly, ma'am. With that, we have seen, since you have very correctly mentioned that there have been multiple shutdowns. In fact, the first shutdown we have reported at SFLC.in was the January 26th shutdown in 2012. With that, we know that there have been laws since a long time, and there have been laws, there have been rules, and we would like to understand the internet shutdowns, the law rulings, and the implementation thereof. What has been the challenge? Ms. Grover, if you can, just answer.
Thank you. First of all, Haroon and all of you at SFLC, congratulations on this report. And I think reports of this kind are very important because we need to, if we are arguing for or against anything, we have to have evidence, we have to have information, we have to have data. I know that we are at an era where a lot of the misinformation by anyone and everyone these days, and this seems to be a global phenomena now rather than something happening only in our midst, where data, evidence, information is being shied away from, so that there can be manipulation of ideas, manipulation of public. So I think putting out a report saying this is what the facts are showing, these are the reasons why internet is being shut down, all that helps in both make for people to form an opinion, to create an argument, and to be able to advocate for whatever position one wishes to take. I think also what is very important today in understanding is, I mean, in a sense, it's so ironical. We have such a huge push from the government, uh, from the union government in particular, of going digital in all respects. There was this, a huge push. There should be a cashless economy. And it is true. You can buy your nariyal pani or whatever also at the, on the road by doing UPI. So how it if that is the way you wish to take the country towards, and that is the, these are habits that people inculcate. As a society, we inculcate different kinds of habits, and technology today plays a very crucial role in how we conduct our daily lives. In the middle of it, for cheating, it actually is bewildering, and I had no idea till SFLC had asked me to appear for them in this matter, that cheating in public exams is a reason why internet is frequently shut down. And now you have just informed us that for 3 days in Jharkhand. As a lawyer, the first thought that crossed my mind was, so the courts have told us we can appear via online in matters not just in the High Court, but actually even in district courts. But let's stay only with the High Court for now. Supposing I had a matter before the Ranchi High Court, and I had thought that, all right, I shall appear online. I don't know if that facility will be available. Surely neither the court nor the lawyer is going to align their table to the holding of public service examinations. So every part of our life today is in many ways connected with technology, and that is something that is a state policy. And now that very state is acting counter to its own policy and actually clamping down. So what is interesting is that technology has actually somewhere given the government greater powers. Earlier, you could not determine how we will conduct our day, but today you can by shutting the internet down. So it's not just for, I wouldn't call it a tool of governance. I think it's increasingly becoming a tool of control. It is social control as well as political control. And technology has enabled that control to become easy for the state. And therefore, even as we talk about internet shutdowns, I think part of the conversation will always have to be about democratizing that control, which, as we know in law, and which your report, I'm sure, speaks about, and you mentioned it in your introductory presentation about the report, that we earlier had the 1885 Telegraph Act, and then we had the 2017 rules, which were in play when in Kashmir, Article 370 was to be dismantled here, and therefore was for reasons best known, which till date I have not been able to wrap my head around, that peoples whose lives are going to be directly impacted, they were placed in a zone of absolute darkness. They had no idea what was going to happen with their rights, their political life, their vision of who they are, and the rest of the country knew what was happening. And after that, as you said, there was the judgment, of course, in Anuradha Bhasin, and Anuradha is with us. And as we know that at that moment, uh, there was nobody, nobody within Kashmir could even have challenged that, because there was not only an internet shutdown, so you really didn't know what was happening, but there was also other kinds of constraints and curfew, etc., etc. The matter was taken up by the Supreme Court. The judgment came in January of 2020, if I'm not mistaken, and the Supreme Court very categorically held that the exercise of freedoms, the freedom of speech and expression, as well as the freedom to conduct trade and business, today takes place over the medium of the internet, and therefore the constitutional protection will be awarded to it. Anuradha, as we all know, is a journalist, and her entire work obviously was deeply impacted. The production of the newspaper, the distribution of the newspaper was deeply impacted. So it is our right to receive information, it's our right to know, it's our right to voice an opinion, form an opinion, which we always form through sharing of ideas and the interface of ideas. All that was brought to a grinding halt. And as I recall, the state pushed very hard and argued vociferously before the Supreme Court in that matter, that these are national security concerns and the court should not enter into this, and the court should not review the power of judicial review into an executive decision, because J&K is about national security, so have a hands-off approach. The court, of course, did not allow that and said the Supreme Court has to safeguard rights of people, and national security does not give you a free pass to actually completely throttle rights without any parameters. So the court also set down parameters, and the law sets down parameters, and one is, to some extent, there is the 24 rules actually take some of the learnings of the Anuradha Bhasin judgment, particularly the principle and doctrine of proportionality, which has always guided fundamental rights exercise. And it's not peculiar to the internet, but the court has held that any restriction, limitation of a right, if it is not proportional, it will be unconstitutional. Unfortunately, increasingly in this country, we have forgotten the very important prefix to restriction, which is reasonable. And it's not just for the government to decide what is reasonable. There are parameters of law laid down, constitutional parameters laid down by 9-judge bench in Puttaswamy, before that in Modern Dental College. What is the doctrine of proportionality? And therefore, until and unless a restriction is reasonable, it is unconstitutional and should be struck down. And that would apply equally to any order of internet shutdown. I will pause there and we'll pick it up later.
Sure. Thank you. That puts in a perspective of the very of a personal and professional challenges which is being faced by persons such as Ms. Bhasin and others as well. So, Ms. Bhasin, if you could just highlight those challenges of reporting under these prolonged blackouts, and also that we have seen this hesitance of the state to not impose internet shutdowns when there are, of course, alternative measures in place. So if you could just shed some light on that, that would be very nice.
Okay, that's voluminous. But to begin with, I mean, as I said, it was only in 2019 that I understood how internet shutdowns were being used to disable people from speaking out or from being heard. And journalists form an important part of that. Before that, we'd all kind of normalized the few, random internet shutdowns that kept happening repeatedly, but they were smaller and they were not the intensity was not so high. Um, like a journalist's job is to amplify not the official narrative, but to become a bridge between the people and the rulers. And it does so by asking the government questions, A, and two, by bringing the voices of the public into the public domain. Now, here is a major decision in 2019 where a major political decision has been made. There was curfew-like situation out on the roads, even in Jammu, and barbed wires that had come up everywhere. People's access to people had been broken down, and Kashmir was completely silenced. The Muslim majority areas of Jammu region were completely silenced. There was no access to them at all. And I felt as a journalist, I wasn't doing my job. If I can't hear their voices, all I can hear is the television blaring out with all government functionaries telling me everything is happy, people are fine. Um, uh, then I'm really not doing my job. I think, and apart from my own personal challenges, I think people in Kashmir, as they were compelled to work out of a facility called a media facilitation center, where a few computers were set up by the government, and all they got was, they had to jostle for space. There were about 150 to 200 journalists, 3 4 computers, and all they got, if they were lucky, was 15 minutes to do all their work, and that's not sufficient. And besides, um, it was all under the surveillance. Those devices belong to the government. There was a person sitting there. There was one mobile phone provided. And let me remind that this internet shutdown was so pervasive that, not only was the internet shut down, landline phones had been shut down, mobile phones had been shut down. So there was no way of communicating with people. And this is how the journalists worked from there, uh, which also creates, I feel, in hindsight now, I feel what hasn't been discussed in the public domain is how these prolonged internet shutdowns create a psychological impact. They instill deeper fear because they damage your and destroy your dignity, because you're compelled to work out of a place which looks like a chicken coop, where you're jostling for space, where trust levels are broken with your own colleagues, where you constantly feel that you are being surveilled and you are fearful of doing your work independently. I think that psychological impact is a discussion we do need to have, because internet today, when we say it's empowering, when it is used to disempower people and it is done for a prolonged period, it has huge psychological consequences. And the other thing that I would like to discuss about, the professional challenges, it's never been kind of measured in measurables, how journalism was impacted, because even in the court, um, the government lawyer kept arguing that, why are they not publishing? Because for us, we had 2 editions, Srinagar edition and Jammu edition. Jammu edition was being published, but there wasn't much news of rest of the state. The Srinagar edition was shut down for 2 months because we had no internet and our head office was in Jammu. All decision making was made there, all opinion pages were made there. The newspaper, so there were a few newspapers that had shut down for a while, for some weeks, where they didn't bring out any publications, but there were a couple who continued publication in truncated forms with no content other than some official statements being provided, or what the state was saying. There were no voices from the public. There was no opinion. And these were just about 4-page broadsheets that were coming out. Now, no court would go into the argument of, so this is what the government lawyers said, these newspapers are being published. So what they measure, when you measure a newspaper in terms of the size of the column, not in terms of what its content and purpose is. I think that's also another argument that needs to be a discussion that needs to be had. And as regards, okay, why do states not go for alternative measures, but I think that's because, short and simple, states are inherently undemocratic. Most of the times, and if you look at the ways in which internet has been shut down, except for the cheating thing, I think it probably reflects also a lot of inefficiency, because that's the most absurd one. I mean, all you need to do is, people going into the exam center, is you ban devices. You keep your checking thorough. That's all you need to do. And including, all those supervisors who are there. But most of the other decisions, they're not whimsical. They are aimed to serve a purpose, that is to crush dissent, to hide truth, to whether it is preventive, internet shutdown, or reactionary. It's always to hide truth, to suppress people's voices. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for giving that detailed analysis. And actually, the psychological impact is something that even we have seen. We in our internet shutdowns tracker, we have a section called Lost Voices, where whenever there's an internet shutdown, we try to reach out to the citizens of that area and try to take in their experiences. And managing internet shutdowns for the past few years, every time I read such voices, it puts things into perspective on how privileged we are and how easily can our voices can be taken away. And I think that brings us the question of the work of civil societies and how organizations such as ours and journalists and lawyers, the three different triangle setting here, how can we work through, let's say, policy, strategic litigations, and every other mechanism to challenge internet shutdowns? Because in my opinion, we have seen that the Anuradha Bhasin judgment, the Foundation of Media Professionals judgment, these are very good, if I say, I mean, in comparison, very good judgments which have come out, but there's a problem of implementation. So what could be the right way? I think that's the right question.
Yeah, that's a very important thing for us to discuss, because just taking off from what Anuradha said, so democracy is practiced by citizens. Democracy is not something that the state practices. That's a bit of a myth that the state has no reason to be democratic. We have to ensure that democracy is practiced. What we are increasingly seeing, and it's not just in the internet shutdown, but across the board, the greatest defiance of the law and orders of constitutional courts, be it the Supreme Court or the High Court, is not by citizens, not by individuals, not by groups. It is by the state. The state is openly defying the law and openly defying following judgments, orders that are passed, knowing very well that on each occasion, will you go back to file a contempt? Let's take the Anuradha Bhasin matter. It is a matter of it, Anuradha faced this. There was vilification, there was all kind of stuff being said about her work, the nature of the newspaper, both inside the courtroom and outside the courtroom. So the person who becomes the face of the litigation has to carry that burden. How many times will you go back to the court in contempt. We don't have the resources. We don't have we have the passion to do it. But time and energy and resources are also required. The state has all of that. And the state, in knowing that, is trying to exhaust you. It's a different matter that some of us are rather stubborn citizens and will stay with it regardless of the cost. But it's very hard to keep on, and courts don't have the time. Our courts, every single court is overburdened. If you go back with a contempt repeatedly, what does the Supreme Court say? They say you can't keep coming back to us because they can't spend that kind of time. But there is a pattern of defiance of Supreme Court orders, High Court orders, that I think SFLC should actually start documenting as part of its report. It should be an annual annexure that we put out. Secondly, what do we, so how is this entire internet shutdown process? The regulation of it, how is it structured? And I think there is a problem inherent, not just in the Telecommunication Act and the Telecommunication Temporary Suspension of Services rules of 2024. It's part of the colonial baggage, and I'm afraid we have not decolonized our laws at all. Even the laws we are enacting today actually carry that inherent colonial baggage. So where is the colonial baggage? Who will issue the order for the internet shutdown? Either the Home Secretary of the Union or the Department of Home Secretary of the state. Very good senior most officer. What does it indicate? The state is taking this very seriously. It's not some low-rung person. Of course, your own work shows that there are occasions in Rajasthan when the power has been delegated, a blanket order delegating power to a divisional commissioner. Now, when the law says that a senior most officer has to do, then that should not be delegated. And over and above that senior most officer, there is a review committee. And that review committee has to determine whether the order passed was in accordance with the law, whether there was a necessity, whether there was an exigency, whether there was a public emergency, or it was in the interest of public safety, and whether it was the least restrictive and intrusive measure, and the reasons have to be given. Are the review committees doing their job? We don't know, because those orders are never published. In fact, there is an order in the Foundation of Media Journalists of the Supreme Court in 2023 or 2024, where it has categorically said, 23rd February 2024, where it has said that all orders of review committee are to be published. In the Anuradha Bhasin case, they said all suspension orders to be published. The Telecommunication 2024 rules say all orders are to be published. So today, what is the law of the land? All suspension orders are to be published. All review committee orders are to be published. Are they being published? Are they available on the website? Can an ordinary citizen, who of course is not going to have access to the internet during that time, but later, can they access it? Can they make sure that it is in accordance with the law, test it against the legal parameters? No. The state is not following the law of the land. The state refuses to follow a direction of the Supreme Court of India. So what are we going to do in such circumstance? Who constitutes the review committee? It is secretaries of various departments. Why is it? And this is a larger philosophical question that I think needs to permeate across the board in decision-making and law-making in this country, particularly where regulatory environments and systems are put in place. Why is it that in this country, we are suspicious of the citizen? That is the colonial baggage which is inherent in our system. Who is suspect? The citizen. What has the citizen done? Why are we looked through the lens of suspicion? Why are citizens not members of these review committees? Why are they not sitting in regulatory bodies? What is Chapter 3 of the Constitution? It is to curtail and the curb and keep a check on the arbitrariness of the state. That is what Chapter 3 tells us. And therefore, freedoms have to be protected and survive. We are asking the state to regulate itself. That's not going to happen. 75 years, there's evidence it's not happening. And with internet, a technology that is vital to our daily existence, as well as a technology that actually gives greater power to the state, it is extremely important that the method of review and regulation is changed, and the courts have to also ensure that this, the state is a habitual offender today. Surely that fact is known to the court. So what are you going to put in place then? We can't, this good faith of the state, the good faith clause lingering in our legislation belongs to the colonial era and not to a democratic constitutional republic.
That is very true. I mean, that's in one way the white man's burden that they are playing. And you're very right when it comes to when it comes to government orders on internet shutdowns and how they are being posted in public. It's very hard to get for an organization that is working on internet shutdowns. I have to spend hours digging in and trying to find internet shutdown orders. They are rarely available on the website, and if they are available on the website, they are hidden in some crannies where you have to really dig deep, and the exhaustion of research that's needed to find an internet suspension order cannot be done on 2G internet services. That's a fact. Other than that, even after the Foundation of Media Professionals judgment, we have been filing RTI applications for every single shutdown order. And in every single such request that we sent, we have requested for the final order of the review committee, and we have never found such orders. That actually brings how the society into perspective and how this digital divide is being created. And just wanted your experiences to attest to the digital divide that internet shutdowns creates. Maybe Ms. Bhasin, you can take it up, and Ms. Grover can follow up with that.
Yeah, definitely. I think like any other technology, which is new, with which we are grappling, and it's growing, and it's growing enormously because we've kind of transitioned into an artificial intelligence space without anybody, including their creators, knowing what they have created. And how do we navigate that space? It is indeed challenging, but it creates inequalities whenever such technologies are launched. And with governments trying not to make it an equal space, rather pushing for deepening these inequalities, I think it becomes even more problematic. One can agree that this is a new technology, and there are challenges that we really don't fully understand. But for this to tackle it, to reverse or to minimize inequalities, I think the governments need to think more democratically if this space has to be navigated. But unfortunately, if you look at the internet shutdowns, they use the internet digital space to further perpetuate these inequalities, to increase these inequalities. There are still areas within India where digital, footprints are not existing. Forget about internet shutdowns; they do not exist. So those, I think, rather than focusing on internet shutdowns, they should be addressing that. Number two, they use the digital space to violate privacy rights by through large scale surveillance of different kinds of people, of politicians, of journalists, of lawyers, civil society members, and even for planting malware. Now, in Kashmir, that surveillance level is so high because it combines with both the physical surveillance and the digital surveillance combined. So you don't need to just, plant a Pegasus to watch people. You have them regularly anyway coming to the police stations, where they can be interrogated, where their devices can be seized and monitored. And many of them are being told, why are you using this app? Why are you using this app? And there's a particular emphasis on removing signal. I know of several people who had to completely delete signal in their phones and go back to WhatsApp. Some have deleted even that. So they're not even in the using the internet space. So that's another way through this very invasive surveillance mechanism that exists in Kashmir, which exists both at the digital and the physical level and operates together. I think that is also pushing people out of the digital space. They're not on the social media. They're silenced. They may be there, but they're not making their presence felt. Yeah. So.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Ms. Grover, do you have anything to add to this?
Just a couple of things. I think your own data was telling us, in 2019, it was Kashmir, which till then had the longest internet shutdown in India.
Yeah.
Or maybe from what I recall of that time, it was actually the longest internet shutdown in any democracy in the world when the
Yes.
Kashmir internet shutdown took place in 2019. Your data, when you gave us a brief introduction to the report, you spoke about Manipur, and I think you mentioned 200 days, if I'm not mistaken.
More than 200 days.
Yes. More than 200 days of internet shutdown. Now we know what has happened in Manipur. So how are shutdowns being used as one more instrument of political control by the state? In a democracy, if one political party that is in power is today actually has a greater control in controlling the narrative, shaping the narrative, and determining what, after all, we are sitting in Delhi, we may not even know what is happening in Manipur. What is our access to that information if it's not going to be freely available for us to think for ourselves about what is going on and what needs to be done? So that kind of control that we are seeing, particularly in areas which are where there is conflict, and where instead of political intervention, the internet has become one more instrument in the hands of the government, and that I think is a reason to worry for democracy at large. Secondly, and we've seen this coming in bits and pieces, and multiple desperate attempts made, the fact-checking unit ones, all manner of legal, regulatory systems by which the state retains the control. And it was, we've had a couple of very, very unfortunate scenarios in Delhi at the railway station, otherwise people dying. In each occasion, there has been a little bit of fudging of figures initially, or fudging of the incident. Now, just imagine a scenario where the state decides what has happened. So this kind of control which the state wants to keep over information, because misinformation, disinformation are very, very closely related to electoral turnouts and electoral prospects. And I think that connect which technology has made, and therefore, as I mentioned in the beginning, the democratization of control over technology, regulation of technology, is something we need to work towards, because we increasingly see what this use is doing, as well as we know, and Anuradha has spoken to that just now, about using it, whether through targeting persons who dissent from you, or giving fuel to hate speech. So in all forms, the internet is here to stay. Whether we like it or we don't like it, is not going to go away. But who will control? And it also speaks not just to the state, but it speaks even to those who control the internet today. And I think it's a worrying time where we need to raise more questions about what is going to happen with the internet, so that our control over our lives as well as over democracy remains intact.
Thank you so much, man. That was both of you. That was some pretty something to think on. And before we move on to the closing uh, questions from you, we have just one question that was asked in the chat, so I'm asking it so it can be addressed shortly. So the question is: Has a specific case been filed for punitive damages or and criminal actions against the responsible persons for extending shutdowns going well beyond 3 days civil unrest in a civil unrest? Um,
I wish.
Short. We hope, but even if that were,
I don't think the courts are holding the state accountable to that extent. The courts are simply
precise,
telling you don't have such wide powers. Your powers are limited. We will tell you when you have exceeded,
your power.
when your orders are excessive and disproportionate. The courts are not telling the state that you have caused losses and you will be held accountable. That is not
Yeah.
where we are today.
And even if that were the case, we have seen that nothing gets implemented. So what would happen there? And a lot of other cases we have seen that as soon as the internet suspension is listed off, the court calls these petitions, if we are before those such high courts or the Supreme Court, as infructuous. They are not looking into the legality of the matter, but just calling the matter infructuous just because the shutdown has been lifted. With that, because we are running out of time, I'd move on to the closing remarks and asking just a question as a closing remark, that what could be the strategic avenues wherein the civil society organizations, advocates, and journalists can explore to strengthen the advocacy and promote a safer and open internet? To either of you who also decides to go first.
You go. You're the speaker. Okay, like I think there should be more discussions and conversations in the public domain. And as I mentioned earlier, this is a technology which we do not fully comprehend, and it will be misused and abused as well. As it is of great advantage to various people who use it for their work, who use it for communication, who use it for whatever information they can gather or further disseminate, all of that. But it also has challenges because it will also be misused. I think the best, probably the way ahead, should be not for the government to work against the people or the people to work against the government. There has to be a cooperative mechanism. You want policies, you want to even reach some kind of reasonable consensus, through well journalists can be a medium of carrying that conversation forward, but this has to be done at various forums, at civil society groups, within civil society groups, and then reach out to the government as well, different political groups. Stakeholders need to sit, experts need to sit. It has to be done democratically, not through hand-picked people here or there, who will be the yes men or the yes women of the government. Yeah.
I'll be very quick also because we need to sign out. But also that, apart from organizations like yourself, and there are many others who are very seriously engaged with the issue of internet freedom as well as data protection. And the two, all these need to come together. I think people, general people also need to understand that, because there is a reaction we have. Oh my god, there is some violence there, they've shut there is some fracas there, forget even the violence, there is some fracas there, they've shut the internet down. Let us have a considered study. Shutting the internet down, is it going to fuel anxieties? Is it going to fuel rumors? Or is it going to create some sense of, people saying, okay, things are under control? The state is, there is a spin that this narrative is given, which has not been thought through. And I think it's really up to civil society organizations like yourself to to educate people in thinking about this. The other thing I would say is that we need to, the law says certain things, and it's very convenient for the government to come and say, oh, but our rules are very good. The rules are saying exactly what they are saying. True. Some of the rules you made because we put a civil society asked for those changes. But there is, as I said in the beginning, there is absolutely no adherence to the rule. So we need to to educate the public again, to tell people, do advocacy that I mean, honestly, I don't even know if there are review committees. I know there are no review committee orders in the public domain, or you dig them out from I don't know which nook and cranny of which website. But how do we ensure that these rules are then adhered to? And that will never happen. And you will not be able to go to court each time. It's just the logistics of it don't work out for anyone, and the state knows that. These are matters of public education. That how do people say, for instance, let me take a completely different example. Shut down the newspapers of any state completely. Kashmir, anyway, we've always said, oh, you can do exceptional. We've created a state of exception for Kashmir always. In Delhi, in Punjab, shut down all newspapers, all TV channels giving news for one whole day. You think people will not ask questions? They will ask, because it's a normal and natural thing to get the newspaper in the morning and or to be able to switch on the TV and hear the news, whatever be the nature of that news. So there is a sense where people have to feel the ownership and control of this needs to remain with us. And the state is there simply to regulate it and facilitate it. The job of a state is facilitation, not control. And it will be the medium of both political and social control. And therefore, we have a lot of work to do on that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for these insightful for these insightful comments. And it really becomes a matter of what we can do and how much are we willing to do for these causes. And most importantly, I think what comes up is the fact that we have to, as individuals, come to this conclusion that we need to do something. Civil societies, lawyers, journalists are here as helpers. But if the citizen is not in the mood to do anything, I think the work that we do goes in vain. So, I mean, with this, I would just ask everyone in the audience to start reporting shutdowns, start working on this. There are right to information applications that you can send and cross-check. Most of the states, in my experience, I am telling you, would not respond. And they would not respond for a really long time. But you can at least start creating this pressure. With this, we have concluded the session and we are launching this report. You can access the report by scanning the QR code, and it's also available on our websites, both sflc.in and internetshutdowns.in. Other than that, before we conclude finally, Ms. Bhasin, what you have said about seizure of devices, we are also launching the search and seizure guide, which which is addressing these issues and what to do in these situations. And requesting the participants to be mindful of our social media posts and join us for that as well. And once again, thank you so much for giving us such insightful information. It has been a learning experience.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.